Hi, welcome back to the TT Wine Explorer podcast. I'm Tania Tomaszewska. Today's episode takes us front of house. This is the first episode in my series where we move from being behind the scenes in a winery or building a wine or travel-related business to being on the front line, if you will, in the restaurant world. Now, we've talked a lot about what goes into making wine and about building and sustaining a wine-related business. On the flip side, we've also had conversations about how we experience wine when we travel, or how we value wine as investors. But what I'd like to dive into today is how we interface with wine when we go to a restaurant, and what goes on behind the scenes at that restaurant to deliver not only excellence in food, but also a relaxing experience for us to have the opportunity to taste and enjoy a fantastic array of wine without feeling intimidated or like that's work. And so, I'm delighted to introduce my guest for today's show, Josh Carlson. Josh is the wine director at Provence Marinaside, which is a restaurant in the Yaletown neighborhood in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia. You may have guessed from the name that Provence is a southern French-inspired restaurant, and it's located by the water. It's by a marina situated on our beautiful False Creek seawall in downtown Vancouver. Now, Provence has been an iconic player in the restaurant scene in Vancouver for more than 20 years, and it's a really important part of our hospitality community. I think that I first met Josh 6 or 7 years ago now, either at a wine industry tasting event or during one of my visits to the Provence wine bar. One of my first impressions of Josh was that, in addition to being friendly and warm and welcoming, Josh is not pretentious. He wasn't intimidating, and he was truly interested in chatting with me about finding a drop which I'd like for that occasion, whether I was wanting to explore something totally new to me or just wanting to enjoy some quiet time with one of my tried and true favorite glasses of wines. Of course, after visiting Provence many times, I've had the opportunity to observe Josh and his team, and I see that they are like this with everyone. For many, wine and the wine world can be intimidating. Not so at Provence Marinaside. And I think that you'll glean this from our conversation today. Josh and I talk about his start in the wine world, which really started in the food in his teens, how a wine director builds a cellar and manages one of the largest by the glass lists in the city. We talk about the restaurant-consumer relationship, Provence's sans-alc or zero-proof drinks list, their upcoming special wine dinners and private cellar events, and what they've got on the books for 2025 and beyond. I hope that you enjoy my discussion with Josh Carlson today. Let's fly. Hi, Josh. Welcome to the TT Wine Explorer podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Tania. I'm super excited to be here.
So before we dive into everything in our chat, and we've got a lot to cover today, I just thought, and for those who don't know you, that maybe we could start with a little bit of a background and a bio about you. So could you provide us with a little bit of a summary about how this wine and food adventure started for you, as much or as little detail as you'd like to give, and also maybe just the connect with how you started with Provence at the outset when Chef opened the restaurant.
Okay, sure. It's a long story. I started in the service industry nearly 32 years ago when I was actually even longer. My first job was working at the Vancouver East Cultural Center as a food and coffee tender when I was 14 years old. But then, jump forward a little bit to 16. I was in Banff and got a job as a dishwasher at Storm Mountain Lodge. And while I was there, I was promoted to a prep cook. So I sort of started cooking when I was 16 years old and found that I enjoyed it. It allowed me to travel. Cooking, I thought, was a skill that could be transferable to the rest of your life. Everybody should know how to cook so they could cook for themselves, feed themselves, survive. That was sort of my mindset from the beginning. I was also a big reader and wanted to be a writer. So the idea of traveling and working, so this sort of vagabond nature was very alluring to me. Jack Kerouac or Charles Bukowski or George Orwell, down and out in Paris and London sort of feeling. That was something that I was looking for. So I traveled and worked in different places. I worked in Toronto, I worked in New York and North Carolina, and back to Vancouver when my mom got sick. And I came back to Vancouver and I was working for a few different places. I worked for Zeffirelli's Spaghetti House and I worked for Chin Chin's on Robson. And I started going to school, and I was in school at SFU. And a friend of mine had worked for Provence Mediterranean Grill on West 10th Avenue, and they were opening a new location in Yaletown. And he said, "You should go and work for this place. It's like super great. It's going to be a big new restaurant. My chef is really nice. He's from France. You can work there on weekends if you want. They've got a big brunch." So I went with my resume and I talked to JF, Jean-Francis, and he hired me. And I was only supposed to work there part-time while I was in university. I was studying humanities with a major in religious studies at SFU. And yeah, it was busy. It was busy and it was good. And I just was making omelet.
Wow. So it's interesting. So thank you. There's a lot there. Wow. What a cool journey to get to that point. And we're just starting our chat about Provence as you in your capacity as a wine director. And what I love about this is I don't think I knew about your food past. I mean, clearly we talk a lot about food and wine and you're all over the pairings, but I didn't realize or recall that your start was in the kitchen. So maybe how did you get, how does it work that you're the wine director and you started building the cellar? And we'll get a little bit to Provence and what what's going on there with your wine program. But, now you are the wine guy. How did that happen?
Well, it's still a long story, but I burned out from cooking, and not at Provence. I got my red seal at Provence and then left to work in hotels. And I was part of the opening team for Chambar. And when Chambar in its inception, it was so busy. We would receive the food at like 10 in the morning, and service started at 5 p.m. So you needed to have like all your food prepped and ready. And then service went until 1 a.m. and then clean up until 2, 3 a.m. and then have some beers. And next thing I know, I was like exhausted and burned out from cooking. So I talked to JF, who was my mentor, and he I had a few options, but he like invited me to come back to Provence while I was figuring out what I wanted to do and work in the front of house, which I did. And I went back to school to get my sommelier ticket. Actually, that's a bit of another story. Can I change the story? Or I'm going to switch gears here. Okay. So
okay. Switch gears. Wine is like that. Wine is fluid. So let's hear how you got into it.
Okay. So, I was involved in romantically, with a woman who was a sommelier, and we ended up getting married. So I was a cook and she was a sommelier. And then we did our ISG training together, with Mark Davidson,
right,
through VCC. So yeah, with like a cook's background, studying wine seemed sort of like natural. And with studying religious studies, like being able to study wine kind of went together as well. It's all like story and it's a bit of alchemy. It's a bit of
yeah, absolutely.
Words, and then the food background and putting it all together. And I did very well. I got perfect marks for the first 2 and near perfect for the 3rd level. And then I went back to Provence to talk to JF about what I was going to do next. And there was an opportunity to come back in more of an operations role with his first restaurant. So I came back to work for the first restaurant in more of an operations role. Part of that was being the wine buyer. I wasn't confident enough as being the wine buyer because I had never done it before. But he said, I trust you, your work with finance, and I trust your palate. So just buy what you like, and you'll learn the rest while you move.
I know Provence has been around for more than 20 years. So, um, times change, people's palates change. Yours probably did. And now, jump to today and, maybe, so thank you for all that background. And now today you are the wine director, and you have many roles. I think there's a lot of breadth and depth of your role at Provence. You are part of the furniture, so to speak, in all the best ways, that have been there for long and integral to that business. So, for those who haven't been to Provence or who are not from Vancouver, have not had the chance to visit, in broad brush strokes, maybe if you could just outline, the vision and the mission of the team, the chef and you, and the food and wine, what you're looking to provide as an experience, I guess, in the ethereal terms that you mentioned, talking about religion or, the food and the components. And also maybe now you've got one of the biggest wine lists in the city, and you've got a huge bottle list. So I know that's a huge question, but, for the elevator pitch, if someone's saying, wow, what is Provence about? And what do I get when I come in the kind of thematic sense? How would you answer that to someone, let's say, visiting who hasn't come to your restaurant?
Well, I appreciate you keeping me on point and on topic. So the elevator pitch. I mean, Provence is a region in the south of France that sits along the Mediterranean Sea. JF was born just outside Marseille. So the food is really a reflection of what he grew up eating. His mother was a chef, Suzanne. She had 2 great restaurants in Marseille. So really it's like West Coast ingredients with Southern French care and cuisine. So the restaurant over the years has gone through a lot of different sort of incarnations and like feeling different trends. But right now it's really focused on that. It's with the wine program included. I focus on wines from the south of France, Mediterranean, but mostly like northern Italy with a touch of Spain, a touch of Portugal, and then the rest of France. And then because of the food coming from Western Canada, the Pacific Ocean, then there's definitely some wine from British Columbia, from Vancouver Island or the Gulf Islands or the Pacific Northwest. And also like wines from BC are like perfectly unique. There's not a lot of them. They don't really make it outside of market. So we do see a lot of tourists. So it's a good point for us to have a conversation about wine from BC with people from all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, I think you provide a wonderful touch point for locals and for visitors, not only for the ability to taste British Columbia wine, but really go on a wine journey beyond and in France, but beyond that. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. You've got one of the biggest wine lists in town, I think, both by the glass and by the bottle. So just so people understand, the depth of your offering, roughly how many by the glass offerings do you have now? And then how many, bottle selections would you say? Just to give people an indication of when they come in and look at your wine lists, what's in front of them.
Sure. So it kind of like varies, give or take a few listings, but just depending on season, depending on what's happening. Currently, we have around 140 wines by the glass, and almost 500 bottle selections, call it.
Wow.
The wines by the glass, we have a variety of preservation systems that allow us to have so many wines open in quotation marks. A lot of them aren't open. We do have, and I'll just quickly list them off for you. So, and if you wanted me to discuss further, like how that's possible, then I can tell you. But we have wines that come in keg format.
Yep.
Approximately 30 of them. We have sparkling wines that we use. It's called a verre de vin machine. It replaces CO2 in the necks of sparkling wine bottles, similar to perlage. We have an enematic machine, which is like a vacuum system that uses nitrogen to blow out any oxygen that might get in the bottle. And then uses like a vacuum system from bringing the wine up from the bottom of the bottle. And that's about, I think it's 14 bottles that we have in the enematic machine. And then we use what's called Coravin, which is a system that like punctures the corks of bottles and uses argon to displace oxygen, and then has a little spigot where you're able to pour wine out of the bottle. And then we use the old-fashioned method of pulling corks out of bottles and pouring wine directly out of the bottle into glasses.
Yeah. Well, thank you for.
We take out the oxygen or displace it with nitrogen at the end of the day to preserve it. Everything is refrigerated. Everything is dated.
Yeah.
Everything is sniffed and sometimes tasted by myself or the sommelier team. And if it gets to the table and the guest doesn't like it for whatever reason, we replace the glass immediately.
Yeah. Thank you for going through all of those steps. Just the different methods of dispensing the wine when it's not being poured by or purchased by the bottle. I really, really appreciate that. And I know I visited you in the wine bar and the restaurant, the bar and the restaurant several times where I have been able to avail myself of all of those techniques. And it provides a fantastic opportunity for me as a wine explorer. So I'm, coming in by myself or with a friend, we're not going to buy a whole bottle of wine. We just want to taste a glass. So aside from by the glass, you have a lot of bottles. And although I've not seen it, I gather or expect that you have a deep, deep cellar. And, I'm intrigued by the fact that you started the story with the fact that you started in the kitchen and then you became the wine buyer. And, now there's, I'm sure, a deep cellar that you've built. So how does a wine director build a cellar? And I know this is probably more for people not in the industry, but, how do you go through it? How do you manage it? And in really broad terms, I guess you have to assess inventory and go with, aside from business cycles, I suppose, and we'll get to that, but consumer trends, or maybe it's just like, well, this is what we think is really great. And you see what's a take up, but also presumably you go out to wine regions. I expect that you have agents visit them, and wineries come to you, but you must go traveling to regions. So can you just provide a few kind of examples of how you manage a cellar?
Sure. I mean, we're very fortunate that we have the space and also the budget to manage a larger program. When I first started buying, wines weren't really made for consumption right away. You had to lay things down in order for them to become palatable, and also they would gain value by 10% per year was the rough equation of until you were to sell it. So if you were to buy a Barolo that was, a 2000 Barolo, that's going to be pretty tight until it was like 2010, then that'll need a healthy decanting. But when your guest comes into the restaurant, they're not going to be able to have a wine decanted for 2 to 3 hours or more before eating. So fortunately, over time, wineries changed their path and they made wines more ready to consume. But I still I taste everything that I'm going to purchase. So I have an idea of how long it might need to lay down. And I put things in like a pipeline. So I have an idea of this is ready to drink now. Call it a 2019 Burgundy. It's by the glass. But the 2020s were good, but then the 2021s are kind of tight, and they're not going to be ready until after the 2022. So I just have like a mental map, I guess, of what I will pour, and then as those run out, then I have things in the wings where I'll be able to bring them into their like consumable spots. Like I have some wines from Felton Road that go back a little
Great
bit.
New Zealand Pinot Noir.
Which I love them. They don't really fit the program so much, but I just love the style of the wine. So every once in a while, my list will have like a little highlight of some wines from the New World or somewhere that I, like Felton Road, for instance.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make, an observation about, well, this may not fit with the program, but you like it. And I think that's kind of human. A lot of us, if we're not in the industry or everyday consumers, they think, you know what, that's not really going with this theme, but I like this wine and I think it can work anyway. And maybe this leads into my next, and one of my other questions, which is um, the kind of reflexive nature, I suppose, of the wine director and chef and the offering of a restaurant to the patrons, and this balance of I'll call it wine education, or helping, for those who would like to do a deep dive and learn about wines, and you can do that, or providing, offering an integrated experience where you can think the wine and the food dance well together, and you're helping them, show them, and they're in a wonderful light. But, you must have people come in who are just like, well, I like this kind of wine, and it might not be something that you have or would pour necessarily. So, I guess there's that too,
Yeah, no, I mean,
consumers know what they want, and sometimes they really want to learn and try something new, and sometimes we all have our Linus blanket, right? So
it's true.
I imagine some of your the way you curate the list is to keep that in mind, and also with changing trends.
That's true as well. So I have a list. It is very extensive, and it's there's a lot of producers on there that might not be recognizable to the everyday wine purchaser.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I did keep the list fairly austere and, maybe not approachable for everybody, because we would have somebody on the floor who would be able to sell something to them. But I realized shortly, like, if the wine list is so hard to navigate and needs somebody to be able to sell the product to the person, then that actually takes away from the sales from
Mm-hmm.
our side. So there are items on the list now that are like recognizable, tried and true. People know them from different either regions or producers, where somebody, say they're on a business meeting, they don't want to have some cheeky little sommelier come and tell them what they need to drink. They can just order something. It's going to be good. So there's that. But then for somebody like yourself who wants to like be exposed to something that's like maybe they haven't seen before, there are like, lots of little gems on there too.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We could probably spend like an hour talking about, the art and science and numbers of compilation of a wine list, and you read about what sommelier, or, the pressures that restaurants and somms and wine directors face, North America or Europe now or anywhere, about getting the balance, right, of the by the glass in particular, and curating a wine list that's going to be approachable, but also satisfy, the curiosity of others, perhaps, who want to do a bit of a deeper dive and go off the beaten track of what they may normally have be their go-to. So I think for me, I'd feel like being a chess game of really hard. So I commend you, because when I go to Provence, you do offer that. There is and I find it in a very approachable a manner. And I always love recommending the restaurant or going to see you at the bar, because I find that there is no, for me anyways, no pretense. So that's at least, me as, both a wine professional, but also I think, an everyday consumer. So I think you do get that great balance, personally, in my experience.
I think that's like our MO as a restaurant, is like, we want people to be able to come in from whatever walk of life and feel comfortable. If they are the person who's coming off the yacht in their flip-flops and they're used to drinking Krug by the bottle, on the patio, no problem. But if they're like my mom, who comes one day a year and it's a special occasion, then also no problem. Let's make it a special occasion for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got stuff on keg, and I'm not saying that isn't special, but we'll get to that separately. But also I think, things that one might not consider to be, a happy hour, a daily glass of wine, where I think the keg system has made things accessible that you might not have considered before. So actually, maybe we should just go into that now, and I can go back to a few other things I had in mind. So, if you don't mind, because you did mention you've got more than 30 wines in the keg tap system. And for those out there who are listening to this, it's keg, yes, wine in a keg, like small stainless steel kegs that beer comes in other drinks. And I would say, in addition to the breadth of your wine list and the approachability, I think another way in which Provence and you are a leader in our city, at least, is in the keg system, your keg system. So can you just chat a little bit about, what you have in the keg? You said you've got more than 30. I know they rotate.
Provence started with 8 taps in the wine bar. It's like a long evolution, but and then now we have a total of 48 taps.
Wow.
But they're not all used by wine, because there's actually not that much wine to be put in keg right now, and it's becoming less and less every year. But that said, it's been a really fun journey, because a keg of wine, 19.5 liters, is the equivalent of 26 bottles. It's in an anaerobic environment, which means that the first glass is the same as the last glass. It's great for reducing the carbon footprint. Everything's in stainless steel, so it's easy to reuse. It's refrigerated, and there's no real variation from the beginning to the end, where if you open a bottle of wine and that wine is open 1 day, 2 days, then you're going to see bottle variation from the first glass to the last glass.
And you have both British Columbia and French wine in the keg?
Yes, it's mostly British Columbian. We have currently 1 French wine and 2 Italian wines.
Okay.
So the pandemic really messed that up, because when restaurants weren't open, wineries weren't able to pivot with the wine in kegs. There was no way for them to sell it to a consumer, because not everybody as much as everybody wants to have a wine tap in their home, nobody really had that. So they were sitting on all these wine kegs until restaurants were able to reopen. So it's really made wineries sort of at first be a bit trepidatious of putting wine in keg, and then needed me to talk to them and either pay for it up front or come to terms with how we were going to pay for it, and also ordering less, so that we weren't going, everybody was getting to the next vintage without paying too much for storage. Which is great, because then we get to the next vintage and we get to see what's out there and then put more in keg. But as you know, in BC, the last 2 vintages really since 2022 have been very bad.
Yeah.
And
volumes are down, so there isn't a lot of wine right now to go around, and that itself is probably another hour. And also, your views about whether you would get wine from this replacement vintage, and how consumers are going to react to that. So
exactly,
I just thought of that now. I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments, or it's too early to say, and you'll just see how things unfold. Or what do you think?
I've already looked to elsewhere. I've talked to wineries in South America and South Africa and Australia and the United States and even Ontario about putting wine in kegs. There's a lot of laws, first of all, in Canada about wine transportation, but and then also volume expectations from wineries from South America. How much do they have to put in there in order for it to be feasible? And then I don't know if it's good for us. So I'm really sort of I'm rolling with it, but I think we're going to be pulling back from the wine in kegs over the next few years.
So you mentioned the pandemic. I know no one really wants to talk about it, but at the same time, in the wine and hospitality industry here and in Canada, and obviously more broadly, that there was a lot to navigate. Starting, I guess, about 5 years ago. And I remember in the early days of the COVID era, Provence, when you guys you did what you could, you prepared to go meals. When our local regulations loosened up or modified, you were able to sell bottles of wine or other drinks with the to-go. You were very active in community support and hospitality support. You built an outdoor patio when that was allowed. So I imagine it was incredibly challenging and scary and frightening, especially for, people in the restaurant and for your teams. 5 years on now and looking back at the things that you had to do to kind of get through that, those types of things, is that still part of the business? I know the patio is there. Obviously, I see it. I think it is. It's winter now.
Yep.
But, that those kind of the remnants, or let's say the legacy of that, how's that? Has that carried through? Like, do you still do a lot of to go, or are you kind of back to on premise, or like how is that unfolded now and then kind of 5 years later?
Yeah, it's a great question. And without getting too much into it, so before the pandemic, we didn't want to do food to go. We didn't feel that, takeout was a good representation of, what we were doing in the restaurant. Who wants to like open up a bouillabaisse after it's been sitting in a box for however long and then heat it up, I guess, and then eat it? Like, is it going to show the same? Is it going to be the same? So we were discouraging food to go prior to the pandemic. But, then the pandemic happened and we were in a lot of real-time strategies of like how to, continue to make revenue, pay our team, pay for product, pay for, all the stuff. And so takeout was definitely a big part of it. So yes, we still, takeout is definitely a big part of our business now. It's not like the main part, obviously, but it's like having an extra server on the floor throughout the day. So, I'm not sure exactly, but it's about, could be anywhere from $500 to $15 a day in sales, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've had to like adjust like which products we do sell and offer. And, we're very cautious of like making sure that when somebody orders it, it is exactly ready when the person who's picking it up is there, because we want it to. We don't want it to
be hot.
Around. We want it to be hot. We want people to enjoy it. So
yeah.
And then for wine to go, that was definitely something that was happening at first. I think consumption overall was way up during the pandemic. So we did see a spike of people looking to consume. So we did offer that, but I feel like consumption is down now. And also liquor stores are open and available for people to go into. So I don't think they necessarily need to support restaurants by buying wine to go.
Yeah. And just on that, perhaps that's a good segue to something else I had in mind. But yes, during COVID, I used to go on observationally and also just by the numbers, consumption went up for sure. And now we're seeing consumption amongst many different sectors or sectors of the population or demographics drop for different reasons. It might be consumption of wine is down, but certain groups of tasters and explorers are trying other types of alcoholic beverages, craft cocktails, spirits, RTD, beer, and then also, something I know that I've come in and chatted with you a lot about, which is the rise of the no-low space or the low alcohol space. So, that's a movement. It's real. It's being embraced and discussed a lot. And certainly even in the last couple of days with, new statements by the Surgeon General in the US. And I know on my podcast series, I've had a lot of discussions with people about the rise of the no and low for different reasons, conscious consumption, health concerns, trying different things out generationally. So, by way of backdrop, maybe we can chat a little bit about what you're seeing in that space and what Provence is doing. I know one of my most recent visits to Provence, I really enjoyed sitting at the bar and chatting with you I explored specifically non-alcoholic drinks. And I remember having a really great hibiscus habanero cocktail concoction of some sort. I can't remember the exact name. And I remember you introduced to me a great sparkling unfermented Gamay Noir Verjus from France. I think it was called L'Antidote. And I just loved it. I'd have to say it's one of my favorite non-alc drinks I've had in the last 4 to 5 months. And I've been exploring a lot. So I've just named two, but maybe for those who haven't been into Provence recently, who are interested in exploring this no-low space, whether it's dry January not, just as part of lifestyle. Can you give a few examples of, again, you've got a big kind of zero proof list. What's on there? Categories or some of your, some popular picks right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, with having so many offerings that are alcoholic offerings, having a large offering for no or low alcohol consumers just kind of came naturally. So we call it the sans alc cool page, or without alcohol page.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at the last page of our wine book. So it's easy to navigate too, if, like, hopefully, depending on who's consuming, if they're triggered by looking at alcoholic pages, then they can just skip over all those pages and just get right to that page.
Mm-hmm.
There are, categorically, there's these like shaken and stirred or built, which is our cocktails, and I'm using quotation marks over here.
Yep.
Those are our mocktails or zero proof cocktails. Yep. And then we have the near beers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my mom always called fake beers.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And then I was like, what are we going to call like the fake wines, or like the So we called those like wines.
Yeah.
They're like wine, but they're not wine. And like the other wine list, it's like, it's dynamic. So we have things that come on and go off, things that, but based on popularity or based on what I like or what other people like.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I'm like really happy with it. For our mocktails page, our bar manager and the assistant wine director, Ryan, he does an amazing job. I'm so happy with him, and he's like so creative, and his palette is fantastic. He's so
It's
bright.
A great list. I jump around Vancouver quite a bit, and I think your page is great. It's got a lot of variety there, and I think there really is something for everyone.
Thanks.
I've got a couple follow-up questions on this topic because it is very timely. I think for lots of reasons. There's a lot of interest in this space, and or maybe I think that because I'm in the beverage industry and I think a lot about it. But what are you seeing for the people who come into Provence that sit at the bar in your restaurant, the wine bar? Are you seeing an uptick in the interest in this? So this is real. This isn't just me in the industry or people saying like you're seeing this happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also am seeing people who formerly came in and would hop around my By the Glass program, and drink a bunch of wine and then leave and come back weekly, have some sort of resolution with themselves, and now coming back and doing the same thing with that non-alcoholic page. So, things change for people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm a case in point. I mean, I'm alternating back and forth. I like to try wine. I like to try non-alcoholic drinks, and I like to have the optionality. And for me, it's the experience. I want an interesting drink. I just want the ritual. And I don't say that as an understatement, something that will provide me with an interesting story and or take me to a place through what's in that glass. And I think that you achieve that. I think a lot of the non-alc options do. I think personally more in the non-alcoholic or low-alc beer, the non-alcoholic cocktails, maybe sparkling wine. I have to try more of the red wine. The ones I have don't hit it for me yet. And I'd have to say that most consumer feedback that I get, this time of year, I always get messages from contacts and clients saying, OT, we're really trying to find a non-alc red wine that we like for our dinner. Help us out. And I say, well, I think there needs to be more R&D. And I'll be really honest on that. I'm focusing on the other ones, I'm sure there's some out there, but so here's my question to you. For food pairings, you're a restaurant and food and wine go together. And it's not always just wine that has to go with food. Clearly, alcoholic wine, other drinks do. So how are you managing, how do you manage, or what are some examples of some pairings that people wouldn't think about if they're so used to going in and having a glass of white rosé or red alcoholic with their dinner? They come in for dry January or just any time of the year and say, okay, Josh, what do you think is going to go with, we're having, these are our two courses. What are you finding people are enjoying with that? People might think, oh, there's no pairing without wine. What do you say to them?
Wow. Okay. So
That's a big question, I know, but I'm getting asked all the time. So, I mean, I have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear, what you're seeing that maybe people are enjoying.
okay. Okay. Um, I agree with you that I think that red wines or de-alcoholized or no alcohol red wines they're still trying to find their way, and I think it's a very young technology, and I think that it needs some more R&D, like you say.
Yeah.
Um, that wine L'Antidote that you brought up, the Verjus from made from Gamay Noir from Beaujolais, which has a bunch of botanicals from the vineyard also blended into it. That's great I mean, honestly, I use it all the time. If somebody wants to have beef tenderloin or chicken or pasta, and they want sort of a red wine that'll go well with that stands up to all those things. I have a sparkling Blanc de Blanc called Glimmer, which is very good. And it's good for it's high acid. It's not reductive. It doesn't have a ton of sugar. So that's good for things like, oysters or chilled seafood. Or things like with salad dressing that needs to kind of stand up to the acidity. But I do think that there's like a ton of room specifically in wines. I think the beer market is doing very well, and I think is really good. And same with the cocktails and the spirits. And
the wine I think is interesting, especially you mentioned sparkling, because alcoholic or not, I think, nice dry, high acidity sparkling can go with any food, or many foods. And so I do think that Gamay or the other one I'll come in and try the other one you mentioned, come in and try. And I'll drop those into the show notes for people in addition to information about you in Provence, which we'll get to. But so thank you for that. Let's get back onto the wine, maybe with alcohol in it. Sure. So a couple more things before we wrap it up. One is, and not last but not least, Provence is also a leader in the city and a center for really cool winemaker dinner events and dine out menus. And I know from past experience, having gone to some of the winemaker and proprietary dinner events that you have, I love it because you get the food and you have a very convivial space and you learn a lot and it's relaxed and not stuffy. But I walk out of there thinking, wow, I've just tried some great flights of wine and I've had fun and I've sat and met a new fellow wine lover at the table next to me. So I love the format. So I don't know, what do you have in store for 2025? What are examples of some winemaker dinner events or Dine Out Vancouver, other things that people can look up on your website or look for special events to come and try something new or learn something?
Very timely. And right out of the gate with Dine Out Vancouver, we're partnering with Cedar Creek.
Cool.
Family estates in East Kelowna. And
great.
Very excited about that. I've been partnering with specific wineries for the last, 4 or 5 dine outs rather than working with multiple wineries. And I feel this is a good way for us to kind of really work with their wines in order to pair our food to it. So, and then it's easier for our server to be able to explain the winery, the region, and then, rather than having to jump around a bunch. So,
and I think also for the consumer and the patron, I think it's nice to have that deep dive, and you can really try a couple of different things and learn about a specific place. Personally, I think that's nice. There's so much out there now. A lot of people just don't even know where to start, and so I think I like the fact that it's focused.
Yeah, and thanks. And then it also gives us an opportunity. We're using some of the wines that are wine club exclusive. So things that maybe aren't always in market. I have some things that are back vintages, and also things that you might not normally be able to try by the glass, like wines from the Platinum series. So, it's it's a real fun way for me to curate a tasting menu, and then also to just showcase some of their wines that maybe would not normally be tasted. So,
and do you do anything around the Vancouver Wine Fest? I can't remember.
Yeah, typically we do every year. We'll work with Vancouver International Wine Festival and do a dinner. This I've been trying to think outside the box and work with different wineries that, be more challenging for us. Like we could definitely work with Chateau Beaucastel again, or like different, wineries that are like in our wheelhouse, but
Yeah.
working with wineries that are a bit outside of our wheelhouse and maybe a bit more challenging. So we're working with Wines of Croatia. So there
Oh,
are,
cool.
this year it's, Mediterranean. The grape
Yeah.
varietals are a bit different, but still similar. And then so we have to kind of tweak some of the menu items. But I'm very excited because we're working with Koranika and Stina, and there's like 6 different wineries that we're going to be working with, and it's a 7-course menu and has some really interesting food and wine pairings. I'm very excited about it. And I didn't know this, but Croatia, on our menu alone, there are 3 wines that have received 97 plus points from Decanter magazine. So there's like one with 98, one with 99, and one with 97.
That's really cool. So just quickly, if people want to find out about your Wines of Croatia, do they go to the Provence website for that? Or is that something to be announced and
that'll
can
be
find
announced
out later?
through Vancouver International Wine Festival.
Oh, through the Wine Fest. Great. And something that's really non-consequential of anything. So one of my favorite Anthony Bourdain episodes of any of his shows was when he did an episode in Croatia, and just amazing. I remember I think it was on No Reservations. I'm not sure which of his shows, but it was just the food and the camaraderie and the wine, and it really left a mark on me. Well, he probably did too, but very cool. So if you haven't seen that episode and you're into Bourdain, then I recommend it for the Croatia adventure. I don't know if you've seen it.
Sure, yeah, no,
yeah.
I watched them all, but it's kind of a blur. I don't really.
Yeah.
You binge watch things.
Yeah, exactly. I think I did too. But anyways, I commend that one, the episode on the Croatian, and part of it is blurry in the episode for them because he goes into a wine cave with 2 brothers who are winemakers, in Bourdain fashion, and goes in the early evening and comes out the next morning. So. Anyways, so excellent. That's really, really cool. Okay, so we've talked about. Yeah, go ahead.
And then we've started a more private cellar series. So it seats 14 people and will include either a winemaker or some sort of specialist around the winery. Cool. And we worked with Anne Gros and Jean Tolot of Burgundy and Minervois projects in, what was that, November? And it was very, very well received. So we're going to be working with Pierre-Yves, Colin Morey, and his wife Carolyn Morey wines.
Rockstar winemaker, yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that'll be coming up
cool.
It'll be announced probably in March for April. But limited seating, 14 seats, and start with champagne, and it's a little bit more expensive, but definitely.
Yeah, well, what an opportunity, though. Wow.
Yeah.
And do you do those in your wine? No, for those who aren't familiar with Provence, there's a main restaurant area, there's a bar area, and there's a wine bar area on the side as well. So do you do that in the wine bar area?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, great. So looking forward, so thank you for sharing a few teasers of some of the special wine events that you'll be leading this year, in addition to the wonderful ongoing program that you have. For you personally, I guess, or something that you're, in addition to Croatia, is there any other region or specific style which you're keen to explore and kind of bring back, either literally go out and try some or armchair try and bring back and incorporate in your program? I know you have a lot to do in every year, or, looking ahead, is there any region in particular you're intrigued by and want to try and introduce?
Introductions is strange, but I've been really interested in the Pacific Northwest recently. Mm-hmm. I brought my team down to Napa to taste through a bunch of wines from different wine regions, and there will be some Napa wine dinners coming up.
Great.
But I'm also bringing my team to Oregon and to show each of the different AVAs and meet with some of the top wineries. So I'm just keeping myself interested, keeping my team interested, and hopefully keeping our guests interested by doing things a little.
Well, I think it's great to go that you are able and have the opportunity to go and your team, because that interest with the team and then, on the floor or around the bar, that gets translated to the customer, right?
100%.
And that's vital to the extent not everyone is in a position to do that. But I think that any kind of training or education or experience, even if you can't go to the region or not, really helps, because then that excitement, for consumer, you feel it, right? You feel the excitement in the person who you're connecting with at the restaurant or the bar who's telling you the story or pouring you the wine or making your recommendation. So I think that's fantastic. I can't wait to hear about Oregon and taste whatever down the track, what you might be bringing back from there. But in the meantime, I think we'll wrap it up. I know I've taken almost an hour of your time. So if people, I'll drop it in the show notes. So I guess the Provence website, and is that the best for people to look up what's going on at the restaurant, or maybe sign up for newsletters? And also, if they want to contact you, what's the, or learn more about you, is that the best way to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the best ways. We're on our social media pages, Instagram, and does anybody still look at Facebook? I'm not really sure, but
I think people do. Yeah.
I think we have a TikTok page, but we have somebody who manages all that. But really, just come to the restaurant. Come to the restaurant, hang out, sit at the bar or sit at a restaurant. Ask for me. I'm there like 40 hours a week, 4 days a week. Ryan is also a great person, but our whole staff, we're so fortunate that everybody, is knowledgeable and does a good job. And if they can't answer your question, there's somebody around who can. So they might excuse themselves and say, let me find somebody who can answer this.
Well, that is certainly my experience. Josh, I'd like to thank you so much for joining today and for sharing what is, I know, just a sliver of your knowledge of this world and your experience. And I always enjoy chatting with you. I always love coming into Provence and feeling very comfortable there at the wine exploring and everything that I learn. And I recommend it to everyone. So thank you so much. I wish you all the best for your future travels this year and wine. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Tania. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. And I look forward to seeing you too.
Hey, thanks for tuning into my discussion with Josh Carlson today. I hope that you enjoyed our chat. If you'd like to learn more about Provence, make a reservation to have breakfast, lunch, or dinner there, or book to attend one of their special wine dinners, go to www.provencemarinaside.ca. If you play in the Instagram world, you can follow them at Provence Marinaside. I can also recommend Provence for their daily happy hours and going for Sunday night jazz. As you know, ratings and comments on platforms like Apple Podcast and Spotify help small podcasters like me expand and grow our community. So if you're up to dropping a rating or note where you listen, that would be awesome. And please do share this with friends and family who might be interested. If you'd like to contact me with any questions or feedback, or to be added to my newsletter list, please write to Tania@ttwinecouncil.com. Find me in Instagram world at ttwineexplorer or on LinkedIn. But most importantly, keep exploring and tasting. As we start this new year, I wish you all the best for 2025, and I look forward to seeing you back here again soon on the TT Wine Explorer podcast. Until then, take care.